We have an article about whether or not parents have the right to know exactly what's happening with their kids at school. In Massachusetts, a decision just came down from the first district court saying parents do not have the right to know if a school has transitioned their child or not. Today, we will share our feeling as parents of school age children and the greater issue with that sort of ruling. But first,
Have you noticed that men and women approach news in different ways? Men think about how news affects the world, while women tend to think about how news affects them and their families. Here at TWA, we bring a lady's perspective to news and politics. We seek out stories that are trending in the news and give them our own unique spin. Let's get right into it. Okay, and by get right into it, I mean I am fired up about this. This has me
yeah,
so angry. So I'm
it's
gonna start by
ridiculous.
it is, and I'm sorry if any of our listeners live in Massachusetts, but that's a leftist dream, leftist hellhole. They're in Massachusetts. I have
Get
nothing.
out if you can.
I, I love the history of Massachusetts and Boston. I mean, I visited it quite a number of times through my life, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place. It's too bad that everybody who lives there, well, not everybody, most of the people who live there just suck. All right. Anyway, we
Except
have
for
an
these
article.
parents, apparently.
Yes, we have an article today from CBN, and I'm going to read you a short quote from it. Massachusetts parents of a middle school student are hoping to take their case against the child school district to the Supreme Court. That comes after the federal court ruled that they don't have a constitutional right to be informed that their daughter changed her gender identity and name while at school. The court essentially ruled that her school has a right to hide this information from her parents. The first U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals upheld the lower court's decision to dismiss the lawsuit by parents Stephen Foote and Marissa Silveristri. Sorry if I butchered that, Marissa. Uh, who challenged the barred middle school policy of concealing their child's identity and other information from them. How dare, this is where I am, how dare a school district say that I don't have a right to go know what's going on in my child's life in school? I,
And how dare the court system support them on it? It's just
right, but,
insane.
and that goes back to the liberal hellhole that Massachusetts is.
Right.
I, the, the audacity first of a district to say that this person that I made with my own body, I don't have a right to know what's going on in their life.
And
And
at a certain point in your children's life, that is true.
it
When
is,
they've
but it's
grown up
not in
and
middle
moved
school.
out. Yes, exactly. And as parents, we're responsible for everything our child does. If they go out and committed murder, we'll get in trouble for it. And it's the same with anything that they do. So why wouldn't we be on the hook for all of their personal decisions as well?
Right,
Whether or not they're made in school or at home, it doesn't matter. We have the right to know about it.
right.
I remember reading this article not too long ago. One of my acquaintances online is a teacher. And so she's always putting up like these teacher outrage things. And one of them that she put up was that there should be cameras in the classroom so that people can see how bad their kids are being. And it was amazing to me how many people there were in the comments, parents being like, yeah, I'd be happy to see what my kids are doing, as long as I also got to see what teachers are doing.
Right.
And
And
that is so true.
that was a byproduct of COVID. I think it really opened up parents' eyes because they were able to see what was actually going on in their kids' classrooms. And as a parent of former middle schoolers and some of them former high schoolers, there is kids do kind of close off during that time. So you get your little bitty kid home from school and they are so happy to share with you what happened during the day. But as they get a little bit older, they stop, a lot of them stop sharing that every single thing that happened as soon as they get home from school. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I would absolutely love to know what's going on in my kids' classrooms. They actually don't go to public school, but if they did, yes, let's find out. And I think that that was one of the things that COVID really taught parents was what was going on in their kids' school. And I also remember
Mm-hmm.
at the same time they would teachers and school districts were saying, well, don't look over your kids' shoulders. Don't watch what they're learning. And to me, if I had a parent in school at that time, that would have been a huge red flag for me. What, I don't have a right to know?
Yeah, exactly.
You get my child for 6 or 8 hours a day, and I don't have a right to know what they're learning. I
That
want you to
seems
teach them.
insane.
I want you to teach them reading, writing, and arithmetic. That's it. If you're
Yeah.
teaching them anything else or anything that you have to keep a secret from me, then you are outside your bounds. I teach them
And
the
that
rest.
is why we will never have cameras in the classrooms. Like
100%.
teachers can say all they want that they want to have cameras in the classroom so that people can see how bad their kids are being. No. No teacher really wants there to be cameras in the classroom because they know that parents, like, even if a parent, if they weren't doing anything wrong, parents are going to be constantly making comments on what they're saying and how they're saying it. No teacher wants videos of what they're doing in the classroom
Hmm.
because they don't want to have to deal with all that extra drama. So don't
Right.
be saying you want us to know how bad our kids are at school. Yeah, no, no one cares. Well, actually, that's not true. Good parents do care about how bad their kids are at school, and bad parents, it wouldn't make any difference.
Right.
So
They would still
that
probably
whole
think of
thing
some
kind of made
way
me
that their
mad.
child was innocent in that in whatever the interaction was.
Yep, but I still want cameras.
I, I
I
if
would want to know
cameras,
if my kid was being
right.
bad at school.
I would be more apt to send my kids to school if there were cameras because that holds accountable everyone who's in the classroom, not just my kid, but also the teacher. And you wouldn't be saying stuff, telling my kids that they don't have to tell their parents stuff if there were a camera in the classroom. So yeah, bring it on. I'm all
Yep,
for it.
I'll do those cameras anytime now. Another point I wanted to bring up was that this was a middle schooler. This was not a high schooler that's transitioning at school, which is just ridiculous. And it seems like not too many years ago, I want to say like 2 years ago, people were like, this isn't happening at all. Young people aren't transitioning, it's just not happening. And then they're like, well, now it's only high schoolers. It's only
Right,
happening with high schoolers. But this was a middle schooler. So don't try and say that this isn't happening in schools. It's happening.
right. And it's only 2 years. If we follow this trend, it's only 2 years because before they're uh, transitioning elementary school students. It's
Preschoolers. Like a lot of parents, I'm just going to call these people crazy because they are. Okay. If you're a mom of a 2 year old and you're like, well, he's always been girly, he's always thought he was a girl, you are nuts. Your child
right,
does not think they're a girl. You're influencing them somehow, or they're playing a game.
right. Yep. And I think back to my own childhood, which was ancient history, I admit. But I I loved doing those boy things. And today, if I were in school, they would ask me if I wished to transition. I loved going outside and playing catch. I loved playing in the creek when I was a little kid and picking up salamanders and worms and snakes and doing things with my boy cousins like hike all over the hills and these are boy activities. I had Barbies because my grandma gave them to me, but they weren't a big part of my life. And now, if I showed those things to the world, they would attempt. And I really think it isn't watching a child and seeing what they do. It is influencing a child to try and get a particular outcome. You
Even
you
if they don't
can
realize they're doing it. I feel like it happens the most with moms that either have a lot of sons or only one child. They want a girl. So they push one of them to become one because they're
Hmm.
nuts. Okay, that's not very nice. I'm sorry. They're crazy.
There, that's better.
I mean, anyone who pushes their child into becoming something that they're not is clearly not working towards the child's best interest.
And trying to get an outcome that will suit the parent, not the child.
Yeah. And I say crazy, I say nuts, but really mentally like there's something not right with that person. They need counseling, they need help to and they shouldn't be like the parent shouldn't be affirmed any more than the child. It's a
Yep,
sickness.
it is. And I get, I completely get wanting to have children of both genders. I totally understand that. But if that is not the cards you were dealt, you have to work within the parameters of what God gave you. God gave you all girls, then you raise all girls. God gave you all boys, then you raise all boys. And to make one into something that they are not is detrimental to that child
Yeah, totally.
and to the family. I mean, the over it affects everybody in the family when one person isn't living inside of what they were made to be.
Yeah. And I feel like this ideology has gone from being like one or two people at the edge or like the outskirts of our society that aren't really encouraged by anyone to now it's like it's in the center of our society and everyone has to like encourage it and affirm it or we're going to burn their house down or do something else really terrible to them. And
Right.
I just I kind of crave the way that it used to be where people were told this is a mental illness, you know, let's work to get you out of it. And they actually found reasons why people, you know, were suffering with these problems. And a lot of times it was their parents. Instead of saying, yep, you can just be whatever, you know, you want, whether it makes sense with your body or not.
Yep. So let's move on to another article we have for this episode. This one from UCLA. And the implications of Trump's executive order on January 29th regarding the LGBTQ ideology in school. Uh, Obviously, UCLA is a pretty left-leaning outlet, so uh, these what we're going to tell you from this article is going to have some uh, obviously things that we don't believe. So here are some implications that this article um, had regarding that executive order. Uh, the impacts on transgender students. First, it could uh, impact the health and well-being of transgender students. So they're saying that it could just ruin their health to not be gender transitioned. Impact on recognition of gender identity. Impact of restricting access to bathrooms in gendered facilities. Now, what this one really got me fired up. The They won't be able to use bathrooms that align with their perceived
Psychology.
gender. But what this actually does is protect those who have the actual gender. So it'll protect girls and women's spaces so that men can't come in there and do things that they shouldn't be doing. But according
Mm-hmm.
to this article, it has poor impacts on uh, gender for people who have changed their gender.
And again, this is a layered thing. For a long time, people said, you know, these pretend women are not going in women's bathroom. That's just not happening. And now we're to the point where they're like, only heterosexual men ever perform sexual assaults. It's like, that's not true. Okay,
Right.
these pretenders are definitely also causing a lot of problems in women's spaces. And you know what? They don't have to do anything. If you have a boy in a women's locker room changing their clothes completely, like stripping completely naked and seeing all the girls in there completely naked, that is enough. He hasn't
Right.
done anything. He hasn't committed any crimes according to what the school says. But what he has done is make these girls feel unhappy and unsafe in the place that they've been provided for generations as a safe and separate space from
Right.
men.
And I mean, just to make it more real, I don't want my 12-year-old seeing an intact male. I think that that is a
Ever.
gift that I can give to her. I should be able
Yeah.
to give to her that she shouldn't have to see an intact male in her private spaces. I don't
And
think
she
that's
shouldn't have to
unfair.
take her clothes off in front of them either.
So, more impacts of this executive order that was so awful, according to UCLA. Impact of restricting sports participation. Again, this is another one where we are restricting sports to the gender assigned at birth. So, not letting men dominate women's sports. This isn't hard. Women deserve to have a space of their own. And but this article is saying that it isn't fair that we aren't going to let men and women's sports. So it's a similar issue to the bathroom. You know, women don't get to have spaces of their own, according to UCLA. But President Trump has done what he can to fix that for women.
Yeah. I mean, and he says that he'll revoke funding from those schools and those states that don't uphold these rules. So I'll look forward to seeing how they react to that. I think like with many of his executive orders, people weren't sure that it was going to happen until it did. So
Right.
I think, once funding is actually pulled, probably most of these schools are going to cave. Like they can't
We'll fall in
afford.
line. Yeah,
Yeah, they can't
they
afford
have to
to
have that
not.
federal funding. So yeah, definitely. And I hope that they do. I there always has to be one canary in the coal mine who says, well, we're just going to push back. And I think it was that school in Maine who let a male win. I can't remember what sport it was, but let a male win over a bunch of girls in a high school sport. And the governor of that state upheld it and said it was
Hmm.
okay. Well, Trump is now threatening to remove federal funding from them. And I hope he does, because that would make the rest of the schools fall in line. And
It
then
would. I
the
mean,
last
it'll make her fall
implication,
in line too. That would
right,
last like 24 hours until she was like, okay, fine. We'll go along with it. I
right,
mean, what choice does she have? They can't run public schools without federal funding. It's the same thing that some schools did with the vaccine. They threatened to pull federal funding unless the school required the vaccination. So, I mean, I didn't see anyone complaining about that. So,
right. So
whatever.
you'll be okay. Stop letting boys and girls faces. It's easy. And then
Hmm.
the last implication, which again just made me angry, was that the forced outing, uh, the impact of forced outing on families, that families possibly could reject their LGBTQ youth uh, because of their sexual orientation or gender identity, which I, I think I love my kid more than any school district has ever loved my kid. So again, don't tell me that what I am doing is harmful. If I try and save them from the indoctrination of the left, that I am somehow doing harm to my child. Uh, Needless to say, I will never send my kids back to public school. There's no way that I would trust really any public school to know and do what was best for my kids. No one loves them more than me and their father. And so I would never allow them to become a political pawn in the left's game. And
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all I have to say
I
about
look
that.
forward. So this case is going to be going to the Supreme Court. The power or the people involved say that they're going to be taking it out of Massachusetts and taking it to the Supreme Court. So I'll really look forward to seeing how that goes, and we'll probably touch back on it. Another thing that's notable about this story is we couldn't find it in any mainstream news. This was only
Right,
available in the outskirts of the news. And I think that that's also kind of ridiculous. Everyone
right,
should be talking about this story. Everyone should be outraged about this story. Even if you're an LGBTQ parent, you should be outraged about this story. It sets precedent for other things. The school should not
right,
have more rights over your child than you.
right. I remember just a quick story. I remember a few years ago, I had a friend whose son was very, very sick. I won't get into just to protect their privacy, but he ended up spending a long time in the hospital. It was before he turned 12. And on his 12th birthday, she went to go and log into his medical portal and she was denied access as his mother. And in the state that they reside in, 12 is the age at which your child can decide to share or not share their medical information with their parents anymore. So, if you're a parent in any state, I highly recommend you find out what that age is because he could have denied his parents access to his medical profile, even though they pay his insurance. I,
Yep.
I am fired up. This is madness that
Yeah,
our
it really
government
is.
has this many rights over our children, and they get to dictate this much that goes on in their lives.
And they're
Like I
pushing to
said,
get more. And it's not just about our kids. Think about your grandkids. This is a problem that's only going to get worse over time unless it's addressed.
right? Yep.
It
And
has so far.
we would be very interested to hear what our listeners think about this. If you have comments on this, maybe you think we're way off base. Maybe you think the school has a right to not share this information. We'd love to hear about it. Go ahead and let us know on any of our social media accounts. We truly, I want to know what other people think about this. Are we off base? Do we not have the right to know what's going on in our kids' lives? Or does this undermine the relationship between the parent and the child when the school is telling them, don't tell your parents? I'm curious.
Yep. Got to agree. The school shouldn't tell kids not to share anything ever.
Right.
Well, I think that that's about all we have for you guys today. You can find us on Facebook, Rumble, and X at The Woman's Angle. You can find us on Instagram at The Woman's Angle TWA. Please review our podcast and recommend us to a friend. Have a story you'd like to hear us discuss? Send us a message on any of our social accounts. We'll try to work it into a future episode. See you next time.